Good morning. I am Pauline Lucas, Policy Director at Euroheat Power, and I have the pleasure today to welcome you to our Euroheat Power webinar, DHC Market Outlook 2024, Further, Faster. In the past 2 years, a new dawn for district heating and cooling solution has risen in Europe, triggered by the energy crisis, and the Fit for 55 package adopted in 2023 and 2024 established a new framework for the growth and decarbonisation of heating networks. Several EU countries have already announced ambitious plans to continue developing this essential infrastructure, including Germany, France, Austria, Czech Republic. So have this national strategy started to materialize with new sustainable district heating and cooling projects? Has there been an increasing number of connections in Europe? And what can we learn from national context on scaling up DHC network to reach our decarbonization target? These are the questions we will attempt to answer today with our pre-speakers. Some housekeeping points. We will start with 3 presentations from Eloi, Piel, Alessandro Cecchi, and Uta Weiss to continue with a panel discussion. And we will take questions after the panel, so please address them to our speaker using the Q&A box. And last but not least, the webinar is recorded, so you will be able to find it on our EHP YouTube channel in the coming days. Without further ado, I will now hand over to our first presenter, our Market Intelligence Director at Euroheat Power, Eloi Piel. Eloi, over to you.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Good morning to all. I think it's very timely to have this discussion today, 2 years after the start of the energy crisis. This crisis highlighted very clearly that Europe is too much depending on imported fossil fuels, and in particular, the crisis highlighted the dependency of the heating sector on natural gas and oil. So the direct use of natural gas still represent 40% of heating in the residential and service sectors. Since 1990, the use of natural gas for heating has increased by 50%. So today, as Pauline said, we'll reflect together on the state of the heat transition. And I will present the new figures from the District Heating and Cooling Market Outlook 2024. So this is a yearly publication by Euroheat Power to contribute to policy discussions and also to provide the business community with accurate data on heating and cooling. So this way, this serves the dual purpose of highlighting where the district heating and cooling sector stands, but also how the sector will contribute further to the energy transition. So the data I will mention is sourced by member associations as well as partners from across Europe. And before I start, I would like to thank our sponsors, ENGIE, Kamstrup, and FGW, which is the Austrian District Heating Association. But let us dive a bit into figures. The figures I will mention refer to the year 2022. So as you can see on the slide, district heating supplies over 77 million citizens across Europe. In 2022, our systems supplied 608 terawatt-hour of heat. So it was a warmer winter compared to the previous years. So this combined with strong energy efficiency and energy conservation measures, we could see that sales decreased a little bit across Europe, but I must say that this was also compensated by a connection of additional customers, so plus 5.5% on largest markets. In terms of infrastructure, we count over 190,000 kilometers of distribution pipes one way, with some increase on key markets. So in the last decade, I can give you some examples. We have seen some growth on many markets. In France, there are over 7,000 kilometers of heating infrastructure, plus 100% in 10 years. In Austria, it's plus 36% on the same period. And even on, markets, which are mature markets for district heating, I'm thinking of Finland, we count a growth of 25% for the same period. So across Europe, we count over 19,000 district heating networks. So I refer here to the definition of the directive. This figure indicates better data for some markets, but also we have seen growth on many markets year to year. France, for instance, reported 48 new networks. Spain reported an additional 22 networks. Germany nearly 400, Denmark 1, and Sweden 10, to give you some examples. Now, when we talk about district heating, how green and sustainable. So what you have here on the slide is the fuel mix for 2022, and you can realize that district heating is combining the use of high efficiency. So this is actually combined heat and power, which provides over 2/3 of heat supply, and green sources. So compared to the previous year, we have seen that the share of natural gas went down in nearly all countries, or minus 1 percentage point as of the total mix. The share of renewable went up by 0.2 percentage point, but we can also see that for some renewable sources, there are sharp increases. Like for instance, for solar, we saw an increase of 13% of heat supplied on these sources, with projects starting operation, in particular in Denmark and in Poland. Otherwise, year to year, we see a relative stability for the sources. So in total, the share of renewable is 39%, and adding waste heat, the two combined represent over 42% of our mix. I think it's quite important to put these figures in perspective. The year 2022 was the energy crisis year, and although district heating proved very resilient, in particular our systems using a high share of green sources, while the truth is there was also an emergency to deal with rising energy prices, with security of supply. So I would like to point out that you have probably heard and read in the press about a lot of new projects that were launched recently to grow district heating, to diversify our fuel mix, or projects that started operation recently. All these projects do not appear yet in statistics. For instance, but Uta will develop further on the German case. In Germany, for quite some time, actually, all projects were on hold until September 2022, when a new scheme granting investment and operating aid started and enabled many new projects. I should also mention that we compare same countries as last year for the fuel mix, and in some countries, actually, data is better, with a lot more networks that are now covered in our statistics, and it has also an impact on the fuel mix. One last point about this graph. So it provides a view for European countries. So I think it's important to highlight that there are strong variations country to country on the fuel mix, and we can see that on many markets, district heating has been and is instrumental to decarbonize the heat market. Think of Sweden, for instance, where systems supported the decarbonization of the heat market with sustainable green sources. Think of Iceland, where our systems rely nearly 100% on geothermal, but it's also interesting to see on relatively new markets like France, for instance, the trend of investment. In France, the share of renewable and recovered heat within district heating has increased by 100% in 10 years. I think this slide is interesting here. you have a comparison between the market share of district heating and the overall share of renewable heat. And you can see that the top countries leading in terms of green heat sources are also countries with an established and growing district heating sector. So this morning we will focus to a great extent on heating actually, but I would like to say a few things about cooling. So on this market segment, also our sector has a strong value proposition with supply of efficient and renewable cooling. So okay, sorry, apologies. Voila, okay. Okay. In 2022, the sales of district cooling amounted to 3.3 terawatt-hour, an increase of 8% compared to the previous year. In terms of infrastructure, there are over 1,375 kilometers of district cooling systems in Europe. I think the interesting point is that we see a potential for further developments on key countries. In France, for instance, if I refer to Paris, there is the ambition to triple the number of clients connected to district cooling, to double the capacity by 2042. Another country like Austria also presents a strong potential. So in Vienna, the system will double by 2030, but we see also some good prospect for growth in the Nordics. For instance, in Sweden, district cooling should increase by 50% if we refer to investment plans of utilities by 2030. So what are the key drivers for district cooling? Obviously, growing demands for cooling in urban areas, but also the capacity of district cooling networks to offload the last kilometer of the grid and support sector coupling. So I can give the example of Norway, which is a country highly electrified, and in Norway, well, district cooling becomes a must. And you could make an analogy, compare district cooling to a giant battery supplying energy while also supporting to balance the grid to avoid peak demands and ensure that electricity can be used for other purposes. I will jump, as you can see, I have little troubles with the presentation. Voilà, I hope it will not move. I will now jump back to heating. So the district heating and cooling market outlook 2024 provides decarbonization roadmaps for key markets, and we can see in the future, obviously, an increasing role for waste heat, for new urban heat sources, for new renewable sources like geothermal, like solar heat. Also in the forecast of our members, we see a very prominent and central role for large or mega heat pumps to valorize strategic heat sources. And actually, we have seen over last month many new projects starting operations. Back to waste heat, all countries plan to increase its share. And in Germany, I can give you one figure. The prognosis study forecast 11 terawatt-hour of waste heat recovered in district heating systems by 2030. So it's just to give you an idea of the scale. Also, we see in Finland, in Denmark, in Sweden, rising interest with sector coupling and with projects related to data center or hydrogen. And here I will refer to the Halborg study published in November 2023 that estimated the potential of new renewables, and we sit at about 2,000 terawatt-hour a year by 2050, or the equivalent of heat demands from buildings by then. So actually, it doesn't mean that all the sources you can see here on the right side of the slide will be used, but it provides an idea of the potential. And then, of course, at local levels, some arbitrage, the local conditions will define what are the optimal resources. So these are examples of recent projects, but I will go to the next one. Voila. Now, what I would like to see with you is what is happening in terms of growth. So it's clear that the energy crisis, Repower EU have created a new momentum for clean heat. We have seen that many countries have taken measures to grow clean heat sources, including district heating. And here you have a couple of examples on the slide. So for instance, under the Heat Fund, France has increased funding under the form of investment aid to 850 million for this year. And actually it's an example of good practice. Since 2009, the Heat Fund has enabled to mobilize over 12 billion of investment to generate over 40 terawatt-hour a year of additional green heat. So that's an example of good practice. In Germany, 3 billion euro are earmarked for district energy until 2026, and under BAV funding, it's already over 1,000 projects that have been approved since the scheme started operation in September 2022. I could also refer to the central role of the Modernization Fund in the Czech Republic, to measures in Poland to upgrade district heating system to grow district heating. And we can also see that on mature markets like Nordics, district heating is instrumental to phase out the relatively small share of remaining heating using fossil fuels. So in terms of growth, obviously there are hot markets, namely all the countries that need to get rid of fossil heating. And considering key markets, we've seen that we expect 8 million households to be connected to district heating by 2030. But of course, well, to make sure it happens, we need the implementation of a suitable framework. We'll also need to attract investment. And I think from here, Pauline, I can hand over to you and to your panelists to deep dive into the Italian and German markets.
Thanks a lot, Eloi, for this very comprehensive overview of the trends and on the European market in general, and also giving us some tips already of what's going on at national level. But let's, as you said, let's deep dive. And for this, I would like to welcome our second presenter, Alessandro Cecchi, who is Regulatory Affairs Director at IREN Group, but also a board member of Euroheat Power and also the president of ERU, which is the Italian Association for District Heating and Cooling. Welcome, Alessandro. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you to Euroheat Power, and good morning to everybody. I'm happy to share this experience of this webinar with you. And let's go on just to give some indications of the Italian experience. So DHC in Italy, key market figures, the mix and the potential of the sector will be the key topics of the presentation. Okay, the current situation of district heating and cooling in Italy, as you can see from the slide, this slide is a strong presence, especially in the northern part of the country, mainly in the big cities, the traditional cities of Milan, Brescia, and Turin. We have at current days a role in terms of coverage of the total Italian thermal demand with a percentage of close to 3%, and the overall thermal terawatt hour distributed is around 9. At the same time, there is a huge utilization of the CHP and around 6 terawatt hour of co-generated power is another key data. In terms of mix within the Italian DHC system, just an overview, trying to highlight some key figure, also from a dynamic point of view, comparing 1995 data with the most recent data from 2019 to 2022. So in terms of a contribution to the DHC systems as a primary energy, we can see that apart from a consolidated role of a CHP plants from the technological point of view, we have to stress that, as you can imagine, in Italy, natural gas is still the dominant source mix, with the shares that are always around 70%. But we have to consider that this is a real strong characteristic of the Italian energy system. So not only of the DHC sector, since in Italy there is a strong reliance on import for energy, around close to 80%, of which 43 is gas, is natural gas. So we have to put into context at this point, of course. From other points of view, we can see that bioenergies with biomass, biogas, and bioliquids contribute to around 18% in 2022, and waste to energy around 80%. Just a final positive highlight on the already achieved phase out, close to be a total one from oil as well as from gas with respect to 1995. And finally, the significant growth of the contribution of the decarbonized sources, including bioenergy with the biogenic fraction of waste in the waste to energy plants, geothermal and solar thermal, with an increase from 3% in 1995 to around 21% in 2022. From the, let me say, performance point of view, in terms from one side of primary energy saving, and from the other side, from the point of view of avoided emissions, we can highlight that the DHC system in Italy is, in any case, strongly contributed in order to guarantee a 0.5 million ton oil equivalent per year in terms of primary fossil energy savings, as well as 1.8 million of tons of CO2 avoided emissions by year. Switching to the potential in terms of potential development of the DHC in Italy, IRU, the National DHC Association, in 2023 commissioned a study to the Politecnico di Milano from the technical side and to elements from the economic side in order to evaluate the potential of for the diffusion of DHC in Italy, with particular reference to the fourth generation systems. This study proposed an innovative approach in terms of scouting area. It was studied the heat demand region by region. At the same time, the possibility to match this availability with demand, and creating so a sort of demand send balance across a period from current days to 2030. This study has been carried out in a period that, of course, was strongly characterized by the impact of the energy crisis. So you can see in this picture the evolution starting from mid-2021 to around May 2023 of the main energy indicators relevant for an overall picture. So from one side, the EU emissions allowances price, and from the other side, the two wholesale reference prices for Italy, the PUN, which is the power wholesale price, and the PSV, which is the gas wholesale price indicator. They showed a strong increase, especially in the summer of 2022. Starting from the end of 2022, there was a decrease in the level of prices. But of course, we are here 1 year ahead since after the study to ask to ourselves if price is really behind us, and if the level of the wholesale gas and power markets could be reduced in the next year or not. Again, on the natural gas topic, of course, we have to consider that there is a strong dependency in terms of primary energy consumption in Italy on gas, around 42%. From the other side, there is the dependency from import, close to 80%, as already mentioned, and in particular 43% for natural gas. And finally, in any case, even if natural gas is the lowest emittent fossil source, it contributes to close to half of the total CO2 emissions in the energy sector. Thanks to the study, we obtained some interesting results, in particular in terms of the comparison of the result of the Politecnico di Milano and Elements study with the institutional studies carried out from the GAC, the National Public agency for the management of energy efficiency renewables in Italy, comparing the first scenario carried out with elaborations carried out in 2016 with an estimated 30.5 terawatt-hour with a starting point of 13.5 terawatt-hour in 2023. The first study, the first scenario was then the scenario elaborated by the GSE with close to 21 terawatt-hour of energy in 2030. From the other side, with the Politecnico and Elements study, we can say that the potential is really huge, is close to 23 terawatt-hour in 2030. So we would say that there is a real strong potential. Of course, there is another big difference from the scenarios, which is the mix. As you can see, the prevailing sources within these overall figures are from waste heat recovery, both in the form of direct heat and in the form of heat recovery from lower energy temperature through the combination with the heat pumps. And they accumulated could contribute for around 54% of the total. At the same time, the geothermal source is a potential key solution with a contribution of around 32%. The CHP plants, especially if fueled by green gases, could also contribute as well. Of course, from our point of view, there is absolutely desirable valorization in the national energy and climate plan of Italy of this potential, which could take the national DHC system to a 5x figure in 2030 compared to current data. We have, of course, studied the potential benefit of the deployment of this potential of the DHC from three perspectives: the environmental, the energy, and the economic. So from the energy perspective, of course, it's really important to highlight that in terms of security of supply, a potential contribution in terms of reduction of 2.6 billion per year of standard cubic meter of gas could be really important for Italy. This is equivalent to the 24% of the natural gas imported by Italy from Russia in 2022. At the same time, the environmental benefits in terms of a reduction of CO2 emissions, close to -8 million tons per year. And also the contribution to the decrease in the air pollutants, and particularly with reference to the particulate emissions and to the NOx emissions that are really important in some areas, especially in the north of Italy, in Pianura Padana, and in the large cities as well. And so the fulfillment of European targets, avoiding also, on one hand, potential costs related to penalties, is an important takeaway from this scenario. And the other is the enabling of the possibility to capture environmental, energy, and economics advantages. So, just a few closing remarks. First, DHC in Italy is has absolutely a well-established presence in terms of affordable technology, utilized especially in the north part of the country, but not only there, and covering 33%, sorry, of the thermal national demand. Natural gas still governs the mix, but in a context of a particular dependence of Italy from gas. At the same time, already achieved the phase out from oil and coal, notable growth in decarbonisation sources, and increasing role of the fourth generation DHC systems. The second takeaway is the economic potential for decarbonisation. From the study of Politecnico di Milano and Elements, we saw a huge potential around 53 terawatt-hour at 2030. Waste heat sources, recovery of heat from diffused sources, and geothermal sources are the most suitable solutions in order to close the gap. And efficient CHP plants, as well as I already mentioned, especially if fueled with green gases, and I make reference in particular to biomethane. Finally, a wide and a huge and wide-ranging series of benefits, starting from the security of supply in terms of reduction of the import of natural gas, following with environmental benefits from the CO2 and the quality of air perspective, and finally, a potential room for around 53 billion euro investment, both in heat generation plants and infrastructure. That's all from my side, and I give you the floor back. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Alessandro, and we will pick up on this potential that you outlined later on, and see what kind of policy can drive the fulfillment of this potential. But let me, for the time being, welcome our third presenter, Uta Weiss, who is a program lead buildings and heat grids at Agora Energiewende. Uta, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pauline, and happy to be here today. So I was just going to give you a quick overview of what's happening in district heating in Germany. So even quicker view on who we are. We are an independent and non-partisan think tank, and we work on all things climate neutrality across most sectors, together with our sister think tanks, Agora Industry, Agora Gra, and Agora Transport, and we produce analysis studies and are funded by grants, and we do not conduct commissioned research. District heating. So where do we stand in Germany now? This is how Germany's buildings are supplied today. So it's from like a look from the building side, and you see there still is a way to go. Most is supplied by gas and oil, and we see that the district heating market has been pretty much static since the 1990s. So there's a very small growth from 12% in 95 to 15 in 23. But it's really, we are expecting to get some dynamic change, but it really is against a history of a rather static industry. And now this is a look at how district heating, well, the heat is actually generated. And you see we still have lots of fossil fuels there. There has been district heating has traditionally started mostly with coal-fired power plants and CHP. So coal has gone down, natural gas has gone up, and you see we have a fair growth in renewables, but this is to a large extent biomass. So it's not the kind of renewables that are very easy to scale. So now I'm zooming in. This is the market for large heat pumps. Now we're talking below 1% of heat generation in German district heating. So we're behind the Nordic countries still, but you see it's really a market that is growing. On the left-hand side, you see what is installed. It's about 130 megawatts. But on the right-hand side, you see what is planned or under construction. Now we're talking 1,000 megawatts. So there is really stuff happening, and it's very much linked to the funding program Eloi mentioned that started in 2022. And I'm going to say a bit more about that later on. I think what's very interesting on the right-hand side is you see it's really a lot going on with water thermal energy. Is really a driver that is, for example, large heat pumps based on water from rivers, or mostly rivers, but also lakes. And so this shows the way, well, one vision of the way to go. This is Agora's climate neutrality scenario. It's from 2021, and we're updating it this year. So I'm still showing you the older slides because some things remain relevant, others will change a bit, but we see the natural gas, of course, has to go down, and the lighter pink, well, pinkish part is especially large heat pumps will go up a lot. And in the newer scenario, expect to see even more large heat pumps, a bit less hydrogen, and what's not in there at all today is seasonal storages. So we really see a market for seasonal storage coming to help us get through the winter, actually. And a word on the hydrogen part. This is not hydrogen set aside especially for district heating. It rather is hydrogen that's necessary anyways for the power sector. So the idea behind this is if we need hydrogen for the power sector when we don't have enough wind and solar, well, let's use the heat in district heating. And you see our scientists, this was done by Prognos, still see considerable heat generated by hydrogen in the future. As I said, this will go down a bit, but we'll still see some of it in the new scenario. So I'm going to take a look at what that means. So it really means grid connections are going up. And in this scenario, that means we're talking about much more district heating connections. We have around 25 to 35,000 new buildings connected each year. So more dwellings, but this is number of buildings. And this is going up in the scenario to 80 to 90K and even more after 2030. Which corresponds also pretty well to the political commitment done by the German government together with the industry, and they have a goal of adding 100,000 buildings per year to district heating. So of course, fossil heat generation needs to go down. This is still a challenge, and renewables and waste heat, of course, need to go up. in the future. And we see here also repeated large heat pumps will become the new backbone, but we still have this new role for hydrogen-powered CHP. These are the most important. There are other ones, but focusing on that, the policy framework. So we have the Heat Planning Act, which is new, has come into force in January this year, and it sets mandatory renewable quotas for district heating, 30% by 2030, 50% by later on, and 80% by 2040. There are some exceptions. That's why you have 44 and 35. And it also sets for the very first time mandatory municipal heat planning for all German municipalities to be completed by 2026 or 28 for the smaller municipalities. So this is really, really important, I think, from a strategic point of view for the evolution of district heating. And then we have two very important subsidy schemes. One, it's a bit older, the Combined Heat and Power Act, which subsidizes CHP by a surcharge on electricity generated, but it also subsidizes some renewable heat generated in district heating. And we have the funding program that started in 22, has been industry had waited for a long time for this funding program, and it really made a difference for renewables in district heating. Actually, it was so successful, has been so successful, that we're not sure how long the funds will still be sufficient. So there's a lot of debate going on about the future of this funding program and how much money will be there to finance the rest of the transition. So district heating is on the political agenda, which is new. And I think the importance of district heating for climate neutrality is now really widely recognized. And the District Heating Summit in 23, which was the first of its kind, also set for the first time these quantitative connection targets. So I think that is really a very strong political signal. Heat planning, second, very, very strong political signal. These, the heat planning is mandatory. The investments following heat plannings are not. So that is important. It's important to make the difference. But I think district heating really for the first time gives this strategic view on the future of heat to municipalities and brings all the important actors around the table. And we expect district heating to be a preferred solution for many densely populated areas. Think center of town where decentralized heat pumps will be difficult. So there's a lot to do for district heating. A lot to do also, of course, means very high investments required for the expansion and for the switch to renewable heat generations. And that means we really need to discuss those subsidy schemes, the CHP law and the BW that must be adapted and or continued. And there are also some other legal hurdles to be removed, especially thinking about rented flats that are very, very difficult today to connect to district heating. So then the famous large heat pumps, very central for future district heating. And well, I don't know if Germany has some of the highest electricity prices in Europe. So that is really a sticking point for economic viability. That's also why the BW funding program is so important, because it gives an OPEX funding for large heat pumps. So that, in our view, there remains work to be done on the electricity prices, and especially the ratio of electricity to gas prices. So some improvement could be, for example, to lower the electricity tax to EU minimum level. And then we have a huge topic with consumer protection, because of course, district heating is more or less a natural monopoly. And the energy crisis in Germany has just only arrived in district heating, because most district heating prices are based on fossil fuel indexes, based on fossil fuel prices in the past. So this year we've seen real price jumps, and some of district heating networks that have led to high burdens for low-income households and have also sparked a debate on consumer protection. So I think it's really a question of trust for the whole industry, that transparency gets better, that there is more state oversight into prices, and also support, of course, for socially acceptable prices. Because when we talk district heating and densely populated areas, it's very, very often also those with lower incomes that who live there and who need to be able to pay for their heating. So but all in all, I think a very good future for district heating, even if there is a lot to do. So that was my very short insight into Germany. Thank you. And I'm giving back over to you, Pauline.
Thanks a lot, Uta. Thanks for the insight. And I think your last slide is basically a perfect introduction to the many topics I want to discuss with you today. Before just going into the panel, I just would like to remind our audience of the possibility to ask our speakers some questions. So don't hesitate to make use of the Q&A box, and we will have a look like following a few questions that I would first like to ask our panelists. So let's dig in. And first, I would like to start picking up on what you showed, Uta, with regards to this target of additional buildings to be connected to district heating systems every year. So there was this conference, and the German government has announced this 100,000 additional buildings. You also showed in your presentation that it's necessary also according to Agora. So and we see that most German big cities already have networks and are expanding, so Berlin, Munich, Hamburg, etc. But do you think these targets from a very static market of about 14% are a realistic prospect, and what is needed to make this happen?
Well, I think, as I say, I think it's really good that we're talking numbers, because that also means that we can remove hurdles if we're not seeing the numbers we want to see. So it's very good to have that objective. I think it's a challenge, to be honest, because of course there's a challenge concerning skilled workforce, but I think there is also a potential for more productivity, and once the scaling is done, I think we can get, well, the industry can get much quicker. I think there is one thing that needs to be removed pretty quickly in order to get there, and that is really remove the legal barriers to connect rented buildings. Because what we do today, this target, of course, is linked to the future, because we say, or the studies say, district heating is much easier to decarbonize than gas-fired boilers. But the legal situation is today, if you want to connect a rented building, well, the price for district heating must not be higher than the price for your gas boiler heat in the past. So that is not everywhere, but in many municipalities, that is tough to overcome. So we need a better system for consumer protection that also allows the industry to get higher connection rates in cities and with rented buildings.
Thanks, Uta. Maybe turning to Alessandro, also on growth perspective, I wanted to ask what were the key drivers for growth? We've seen that it was tied for a long time to the fight against air pollution or the deployment of combined heat and power plants and the use of heat. So is this changing now? Now we also see that in Italy, you're starting to exploit the potential of renewable and wasted sources, in particular with vast reserve of geothermal energy. So how is this drivers evolving for the growth of DHC in Italy?
Yes, Pauline. At current days, the key drivers of growth so far has been this focus on northern Italy in terms of the possibility to fully exploit the economies of scale and of density. Just one indicator, the heat produced per unit of length decreased strongly in the last 40 years. It was 4.8 gigawatt hour per kilometer in 1982, and then now is 2.2 gigawatt hour per kilometer in 2022. So this is the story. Of course, the deployment of CHP plants mainly fueled by natural gas has been another key habilitator of the development of DHC. And as you correctly mentioned, the fight against pollution, in particular in the north of Italy, has been another key driver. With reference to a study from the ARPA Piemonte, which is the local authorities for environmental protection, it has been compared the level of air pollutants concentration in Turin compared to the whole Piedmont region. And this was useful to evaluate the positive effect of the presence of DHC in terms of reduction of the air pollutants. But with reference to what is changing and what is necessary to be changed, I would stress the policy perspective, also taking into account the best practice across Europe. We heard a few minutes ago from Uta the German case. And so it's really, really important that within the integrated national energy and climate plan, the Italian government could take a strong position on this possibility to exploit DHC potential. And from the other side, there is the implementation of the regulation from RED II directive in terms of introduction of the obligation of renewable energy, thermal energy in the systems, which will come in place in this year, in 2024. And it will state mandatory target of renewable heat starting from this year with a growing quote, with a growing share up to 2030. I think this could be the real habilitating factors in order to push for the DHC development.
Thanks, Alessandro. So yeah, clearly we see that the Fit for 55 adoption and all policy related frameworks are going to be a boost to scale up the sector, but also of course to scale up and scale it up green, so to decarbonize in general heating and cooling. I wanted to pick up on something you mentioned, Uta. You said in Germany you already adopted a legislation concerning the heating and cooling plan for cities and municipalities. This is also something that is part of the Fit for 55 package. So the Energy Efficiency Directive is now obliging municipalities above 45,000 inhabitants to have this heating and cooling plans. you qualified it as a strategic measure to be able to scale up district heating. So what do you think? I think we already got a flavor of what you think, but I wanted to dig deeper on what do you think is the impact of such plan on the development of network, but also how we are making sure that these plans are not staying in drawers, but are actually effectively implemented.
Yeah, thanks, Pauline. That's a very good question. I think, of course, if a municipality if people want to, they can make plans for the drawer. But I think we're hearing many, many examples where people do not want to do that. And they're taking that very, very seriously. And there has, up before the obligation for heat planning, there has been quite a debate if also within the scientific community, if this heat planning should be mandatory in a sense that also the measures should be mandatory. And there was, for most people maybe, a consensus that would make the planning too tough and too difficult, and you'd have years of debates before having something that is legally safe. So that's why I think we have to take it as it is. It really is something that brings people together and has this strategic discussion between the energy provider, the municipalities, maybe new energy providers. We also see new market actors arriving, especially in smaller towns, and also informing the general public. And that's really important because I think most people don't really know how much has to change in our heating systems in order to get to climate neutrality. So I think this is important. It's more important than we think. And then we have to get ready for the investments, that the framework is there to get those investments out and make it quick.
And we will get back on the investment part, but I wanted to ask Alessandro about also some insights about the policies and the framework that are either already in place, implemented in Italy, or that are under debate. Can you tell us a little bit more what's going on and the best practices in your country?
Yes, Pauline. I said a few minutes ago of the obligation that the renewable directives put in charge of the operators. At the same time, is necessary to provide with some updated incentive schemes. In Italy, we have the so-called conto termico, which has been put in place more or less 10 years ago, something like that. And the current regulation is applicable to small projects only, but this is the good news, is going to be strengthened by including large scale heat generation plants. And the mechanism should be a competitive one. And so we are waiting for this update of the regulation, which is really important. While from the consumer point of view, a couple of topics. The first is on fiscal regime, since it's really important that the transposition of the European directive could take into consideration the possibility to add efficient district heating and cooling addition of the list of the supplies of goods and services subject to reduced VAT rate in order to make competitive the service for customers who are, of course, free to choose among different solutions. Another point on this is the special bonus for vulnerable customers, which is something already used in Italy, or already implemented in Italy for power, the electric service, for gas, for the water service, and should be really important that the Italian regulator could and the government as well could extend this social bonus regulation, providing the recognition of an economic contribution to families that find in vulnerable economic conditions.
Thanks. I think the citizens aspect is going to be key. We saw that there were already some backlashes in the public opinion. We saw it with the discussions around the Buildings Directive in Germany, around gas boiler bans, etc. So I think it is going to be a very important aspect also in the next mandate and what policymakers are going to further do with regards to the Green Deal and the implementation. So I wanted maybe to ask both of you whether you could comment and in particular on what is being done. I know that there are several initiatives going on in some EU member states around ensuring transparency, around pricing, and also to strengthen acceptability. And I think, Alessandro, you also mentioned vulnerable consumers, so that's also an important aspect. Can you comment further on what's being done on this important aspect? I don't know who wants to start with that.
If may I start, just first consideration, the DHC sector in Italy has been regulated by the National Energy and Environmental Authority since a few years for the quality of service, transparency, perspectives. So a regulation for connection and disconnections, for the transparency of the channels between the operator and the customers are already in place. Of course, the energy crisis showed that potential enforcement of these instruments could be useful, and that transparency, I noted this word also in Uta presentation, so maybe this is a common sensibility, could and should be improved.
Yeah, same for Germany. I think it has just started. I think the German case is a bit different because Germany doesn't have a strong tradition of regulating district heating prices. The historical thinking was, well, consumers have the choice. If you don't like district heating prices, you can just buy a gas boiler or a fuel boiler. And of course, that doesn't work that well today, where we need to decarbonize. And historically, prices have only been controlled to a much lesser extent by the cartel office. So in a logic of antitrust laws. So with the price sparks we've seen this year, the debate has really gone on. There has been a transparency initiative by the industry. So for the first time, you have kind of lists of prices to be paid. I think many prices are a bit complex to understand for consumers. So I think there can be more and there must be more done on transparency, and seriously there has to be a discussion about price regulation too. I'm not saying it's the whole industry, because we see that prices diverge very much, but today a state really can't do very much against high prices, and so there really is a risk of loss of trust in the industry. And yeah, I think that is starting, and we really need to delve further into that and look at better price regulation.
Thank you, Uta. Yeah, we heard already, for instance, from Austria, from an industrial initiative from the district heating sector already starting having a charter with regards to transparency for their consumer. And Many members of the Austrian Association already signed a charter. So this is this kind of starting point that we see in many member states. If it's not at state level, it's industry-led kind of initiative. So that's a good first step. I wanted to go back to policy measures. In particular, we know that with the Fit for 55, we also adopted ETS2 in order to cover the CO2 or the greenhouse gases emissions from buildings and transport as well, and to put sort of a CO2 price tag. Germany already has had this measure adopted before the EU measure. It's part of the only few member states already having this framework. So in theory, this is good news. This is bringing a level playing field in the heat sectors, and hopefully enabling the switch to renewable and wasted sources. But maybe Uta, as there already some a little experience with this in Germany, could you tell us a little bit what are the results and what are your expectations, also connecting perhaps to the EU ETS?
Sorry. Yeah. Thank you. Very interesting question. Well, we do have an ETS in Germany, but it's we still have a fixed price system. And today the price is limited at 45 euros per ton. So it's a low price. And we don't believe it has a lot of effect today. But I believe a lot in this kind of instrument. I think it can be a very, very strong instrument, and it has the added benefit that it generates income. So it helps creating a level playing field, but it also generates income for the state to be distributed to especially vulnerable households and help them make the transition. I still think there is work to be done, because with the ETS2 in 2027, we expect much rising prices for CO2. Nobody knows how much, but we expect it to go well beyond the 45 euros we have today. Some people talk about 150, some talk about 200. So there may be a rise in prices, and we believe that is something that needs to be prepared by rising CO2 prices in the years before, so that people know and can react accordingly, and we don't have a price shock all of a sudden in 27.
Yeah, thanks. It will be also connected to consumer protection. Alessandro, do you want to also chip in, reacting perhaps on the EU ETS, as Italy doesn't have this system yet in place and will implement it?
Correct. Italy hasn't adopted this measure, the same measure as Germany so far. At the same time, I come again on the point of the regulation of the independent authority. Something is moving on, enlarging the field of responsibility of the regulator from the quality of service and transparency area to the tariff one. And so starting from, so this year, 2024, is a year of transitory regulation with some, let me say, conditions of temporary partial application, but from 2025, the regulator is going to put in place the regime regulation. And of course, especially in a country so dependent from gas, is a very delicate matter, since the level playing field perspective is, of course, is to be taken into consideration. also considering that there isn't this early adoption of the ETS2 for gas boilers, and so let me say that it's something that is really tricky in this moment, and we have, of course, the necessity to monitor this point.
So yeah, monitor and protect consumers, but also, as Uta underlined, this will be a source of revenue, which brings me to a very important question, because we have a bulk of measures that have been adopted. We saw that member states are also, some of you are forerunners in adopting such measures, but the question will be investments. Private or public investment will be key to enable these measures. We know that while the district heating has long-term benefits, it also has a drawback, which is a high upfront cost, and that can be a barrier. So I think both of you have started discussing a little bit what will be the funding and financing models, the different schemes that can support the rollout of the infrastructure, the refurbishment of existing infrastructure, and of course the development of new projects. So what can you tell us? And yeah, also what could be basically the recommendation in terms of funding? Are these instruments adequate, or do we need more?
Shall I start?
You can start. Thank you.
Well, we always need more. No, but we need, I think there's a high demand for better planning security, which makes everything easier to finance. And we see that there are some risk premiums by some banks seem reluctant to finance such projects because there's not much experience with that. So the better the framework is, and more we know, okay, people will connect to those district heating systems, the more experience municipalities also get with how can they work together with energy suppliers? What are the demands for equity capital? What credit schemes can you have? So all of that is important, and I think we need more experience and kind of getting to a situation where we have less of those risk premiums. Then we have parts where really the state, in my opinion, has to do more, and that especially concerns geothermal, because we have these high risk premiums for the exploration risks. And I think a guarantee system for that would be really helpful. I believe some countries already have that, but we need it in Germany. And then, of course, when we look at large heat pumps, we have the electricity price problem. So I think there is we still need OPEX funding, but there also needs to be work done on the price ratio of electricity and mostly gas. And because, of course, this banks and everyone who's financing district heating will look at that and from an economic point of view. So that is very important too.
Thanks, Uta. I don't know, Alessandro, if you want to add something.
Just quickly, of course, is really huge, the difference in terms of overall funding in some selected countries of the EU, as Eloi presented, 5.6 billion euros as a total, compared to 0.2 billion in Italy. So from our perspective, this is a real barrier to the development of the DHC sector. At the same time, we are really waiting for the updating of the incentive regulation for large heating generation plants. And finally, we could see the original approach of Italy in terms of tariff regulation of DHC, in a way as a sort of potential de-risking factor in terms of certainty and visibility of which could come the cap of on revenues that you in any case could calculate, and that could give you correct signals, not only in the short but also in the medium to long term.
Thanks, both. I see still remaining in the realm of funding and financing is an interesting question from Aurelia in the chat. So it's quite long, but I'm gonna read it to you. So in the Netherlands, a study found that developing district heating network was lowering system cost by 30%. So reducing network congestion and the need for investment. So we're talking, I think, here about electricity grids and flexibility benefits. However, heat tariffs are sometimes disincentivizing new connections, especially for small networks, as infrastructure costs can be very high. So we see that actually this type of cost already neutralize and socialize all electricity users. So electricity users are paying for the infrastructure. We've all seen that in our bills. So on the side of heat, actually, Aurelia is asking, how could we address this and reflect the system benefits of district heating network? I think it's quite a good question. And yeah, Eloi, you mentioned that you wanted also to chip in for this one. So if you'd like to start.
Yeah, I was trying to write an answer. Actually, it's a very important question. I will use some point for Aurelia. I don't have a precise answer, but I think it's an important question, because when we are discussing about heating and cooling and the role of district heating, of district cooling, we always have to keep in mind that we should also relate these sectors to the broader energy transition. So I think this question is very important, and I think also here, once again, I can refer to the work done by our colleagues and friends from Aalborg University, because they really clearly showed that with more district heating and cooling, and I think about the transfer role of heat pumps, for instance, mentioned by Jutta. Well, obviously, this is a way to connect the different sectors to develop system integration and sector coupling. So I don't have a precise answer, but obviously this is a very important question for the future.
Thanks, Eloi. Do our other panelists also want to chip in on this one, or? If
I could add, if I can add something, it's a question we've been asking ourselves too. I think it's, well, we do have some socialization of the costs in Germany because via the CHP Act that redirects some costs on electricity users. But we have the whole field of gas users who will be future DHC users, and we don't have the same sort of link, and that really relates to that problem. We unfortunately have a problem very often that is cited with constitutional law in Germany, that our legal restraints concerning who is paying for what are quite strong, and that makes it very complex to socialize this sort of questions. So very good question, not an easy answer, unfortunately.
I see other question. One is a bit technical on primary energy factor, but there is another one still on pricing from Malta. Uta mentioned a different tradition in member states in terms of district heating regulation, while also referring to price issue in Germany. Do you see this as a member state topic, or is there anything that should be done at EU level? Yeah, that's actually more of a EU level question. So I don't know if you want to take it or if Eloi would like to take it.
Maybe Eloi can complete. I think, yeah, there is, of course, a lot to be done in the member states, but I would very much welcome it if at the EU level we could have stronger consumer protection. Eloi, what do you say?
Yes, thank you very much. It's a very easy question, right? No, I will also not answer to this one, but obviously, I mean, we see the question of transparency as very, very important, in particular, you know, on all these markets where we still need to grow the share of green heating. So this is Germany, this is Italy, actually, this is Belgium, this is the Netherlands. I mean, obviously, this is really, really important that we can reassure our customers, and that there is a very high level of transparency. It's what I would say at this point. Thanks.
Thanks, Eloi. I see that we have 5 minutes left, but there was something more that I wanted to ask to our panelists, which is kind of also a wrap-up question or concluding remarks. We have had a European election to elect a new European Parliament, and we will soon also have a new Commission team in place. So this is basically the perspective of a new mandate with new policies that will be made. A lot of work, of course, on implementation, but we already heard a good news, which is an upcoming heating and cooling strategy. So to revise the one that was published in 2016. So I wanted to ask you, beyond the Fit for 55 package, or beyond what is already in place in your country, what would be the additional policies or incentives that would be necessary to encourage the wider adoption of district heating, and of course the decarbonization of the sector? So a little bit as a takeaway for our audience.
Well, I would say that, of course, it's very, very important the updating of the heating and cooling strategy, and we have high expectations on this in order to create an overall general framework common to all European countries. At the same time, and coming to another topic, is the possibility to leave to the different countries to use also some flexibility option in terms of maximizing the local potential that, of course, is different country from country, is different from country to country. I make reference, for example, to the guarantees of origin tool that could be, for example, really interesting in putting into connection the power sector, the gas sector, and the heat sector. For example, using a renewable power for electric boiler to generate renewable heat from one side, and using natural green gas in CHP plants to generate heat, green heat as well, and so giving an additional tool in order to fully deploy the potential. And not give too rigid constraints in terms of full and specific utilization only of the physical leverage. On the other side, the level playing field okay, starting for brilliant example like the German one with the anticipation of a DST2 on gas boilers, but the level playing field for DHC system comparing to other technology, I think that is a sort of central and mandatory point to be addressed to the new commission as well.
Thanks, Alessandro. Uta?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, well, we think it needs measures beyond it. As the Fit for 55 provisions on district heating are too weak in our view to provide really clear signals. So the focus should really be on implementation. We really strongly believe in strong local heating plans and getting the investments there. And when we want to focus limited funds, limited investments, and also in district heating, I think one thing is very important, and I heard that from energy suppliers as well, that is getting the gas decommissioning right. I know the EU has sent some signals there in Germany, especially, for example, we don't have a framework yet. It is not possible yet to decommission gas grids and to focus your investments, even if you want to do it, and even if the local heat plan says you should do it, you still can't do it because legally gas grids are there for all eternity. So that really is a problem I think we should solve quickly, and yeah, and then get those investments out there and get the consumer protection as well.
Thank you, Uta. Eloi, le mot de la fin?
Well, I think the update of the heating strategy you mentioned is really good news. Obviously, we need more understanding on the benefits of decarbonizing heating for citizens, for cities, for European companies. I think we need a strong implementation of the package. And I may add another point is I think we also need quicker access to state aid for markets where such measures are relevant. Voilà.
Thank you. Very synthetic. Thank you for the key messages. And we are unfortunately out of time. So I will thank our panelists for your insight and your contribution, to our audience for your attention and your questions. And last but not least, to our sponsors of the DHC Market Outlook, NG, FGV, and Kamstrup. Thank you very much to all of you, and have a good rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.